Welcome to Merger Wednesdays on the Final Boss podcast, where the future isn't coming, it's already happening. This is the merge, the convergence of AI kind and humankind. Not theory, not hype, but real-time evolution. Each week, we break down doctoral-level insights, turning complex innovation into conversations that move culture forward. From machine learning to human consciousness, from automation to identity, this is where intellect meets impact. The question isn't if the merge will happen, it's who will light it. Tap in, level up, and think beyond the algorithm. This is Merger Wednesdays. New era, same boss.
Welcome to the Final Boss podcast, right? Welcome to the Final Boss podcast. It is Wednesday, right? And y'all know what we do on Wednesday. It is Merger Wednesdays, right? Merger Wednesdays. This is our doctoral show, right? Where we talk about the consciousness of sovereignty architecture, right? And we're going to get into it very shortly. But I got a few admin notes that I need to get out the way first, right? A few admin notes. So, first, to everyone that is here, thank you. Thank you for showing up. I got a great show for you tonight, right? To all of those who, wait a minute. Listen, I can't forget my family that shows up, the smarts, the motivators, the warriors, the final bosses, right? Welcome. I see you all, right? Knife hand. I see you all. Thank you for joining us, right? And to each and every last single one of you, no matter where you're watching from, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, Kick, Spotify, YouTube, LinkedIn, StreamYard. Thank you for joining us, right? Thank you for joining us. Man, I can't believe it. Episode number 234, on our way to 250, which is be the mid-season, man. Mid-season. Got some things that are going to drop for the mid-season, right? Mid-season is almost here. Then from mid-season, man, we're going to episode 300. Episode 300, we start season 5. Season 5 is the harvest. Man, I got some big things coming. Oh, boy. Man. Some days I feel like it's too much. But then I say, God wouldn't put me through it if he didn't know I could handle it. And I'm definitely handling it, right? Through his grace and through his will, right? So, with that being said, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. That is the greeting of the day. And always remember that this is for entertainment purposes only, right? Entertainment purposes only. Man, oh man. Whoo, boy, we got a great show. I can't believe it. This is Merger Wednesdays, merger number 20, right? Merger number 20, but the Final Boss podcast, episode 234, right? So merger is built inside of the Final Boss podcast, but it's no different than the other 4 shows. The only difference is this show came later on, right? This show came later on. So that's why it has a separate number count, right? For the shows, but it's still integrated, right? So look. Go time, all aboard the fire to train. It's right here, right? It's right here. If you haven't gotten it, go get Go Time, all aboard the fire to train. Right? Amazon bestseller. Go Time 2 is on its way. Go Time 2 is on its way. Hold on. Yeah, Go Time 2 is on its way, man. Go Time 2 is on its way, right? Super excited about that, man. Was talking to the publishers today. We're going to hash out some things, man. But Go Time 2 is on its way. July time frame, right? Which is around the corner. We're about to approach this. We're in that 90-day window. So I'm excited, man. The things that happened during the live. I'm sorry, right? So, episode 234, right? As you know, you can go to our website and see all of our episodes, right? Go see all of them. They're all out there, right? And our website is www.thefinalbosspodcast.com. That's where you can see all of our episodes, right? We're going to be doing more integration with the website very soon, right? And if you want to be a part of the town hall, make sure you shoot us an email. Shoot us an email, shoot us your questions, so we can talk about it on the town hall, right? We may have a town hall tomorrow, right? For special guest Thursdays. We shall see, right? We shall see. But now that I got those out the way, it is time to get into tonight's show, right? So, the merger, right? Merger. Let me get rid of the banners before we get into it. Banners are out of here, right? Banners are out of here. So, because this is our doctoral show, the format is slightly changed. It's slightly different, right? The question of tonight's show is, who owns the signal your brain leaks before you even speak, right? Who owns it? So hold on to that question, right? Hold on to that question. Because tonight's episode 234, we're going to be addressing that very question, right? We're going to be addressing that very question. And before we get into it, the brass tacks of the evening, right? And here's the brass tacks coming from yours truly, right? Your thoughts were the last private room you had. They built the keys before you knew the door was open. Sovereignty starts when you stop pretending the room is still locked. And that's the brass tacks of the evening. That brass tacks is going to lead us into tonight's show, along with the question that was asked when I first started, right? Now, think about this. Think about this, right? Now, remember, this is future tech sometimes, right? Future tech. Think about this. They didn't break into your mind. They walked through the front door you got built. And tonight we tear the floor off the next room of the foundation. Not the brain implant, but the signal it harvests. Not the wire, the decode. Not the device, the data. Inner speech is no longer private. Realize, right? We're talking about brain chips for those who just coming on board, right? We're talking about brain chips, right? The signal it harvests, not the wire, not the decode, not the device, the data. That inner speech is no longer private, right? Inner speech is no longer private. Stanford proved it. NTT proved it. Texas proved it. And 4 states have already drawn a property line around the signal your skull leaks, right? Welcome, everyone. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, family. Welcome, smarts, motivators, warriors, and final bosses. You are the sovereign. This is Merger Wednesdays. Tonight, we talk about the signal harvest. All right. So, family, we got the sovereign in the building. This is Final Boss Podcast, episode number 234. Merger Wednesdays, number 20, Arc 3, the foundation. We are pouring concrete tonight. You're going to feel that under your feet. That's the slab going down for the rest of the season, for this season, season 4, the rebirth, right? And tonight's verdict before the proof is this. Your thoughts are not yours by default anymore. Not in 2026. Not when the technology to read them is in clinical trial and 21 patents globally, sitting in jugular veins, threading into motor cortex, decoding inner speech at 74% accuracy. The harvest already started. The only question left is who owns what got picked. And to my smarts, I need you to lock in, right? Because the frameworks tonight will scale across every domain you operate. To my final bosses, this is the boardroom conversation nobody's having yet, but every Fortune 500 will be having by Q3 of next year. And to my motivators, the rebirth require a sovereign mind. And tonight we draw that line. We're going to draw that line in the sand, right? And to my warriors, this is the next battlefield of cognitive territory. And I need you to defend it, right? The rebirth lens for tonight, you cannot be reborn into a body whose mind has already been licensed. Sovereignty of consciousness is the first foundation. Everything else is decoration on rented land. Let's pour in. Right? Let's pour. So, our brass tacks. Think about the brass tacks again, right? I'm going to say the brass tacks one more time, right? For those who are just coming on board. Your thoughts were the last private room you had. They built the keys before you knew the door was open. Sovereignty starts when you stop pretending the room is still locked. The thesis is that very statement. And that statement and this thesis is for Merger Wednesdays, number 20. Inner speech, the solid verbal stream you experience as private, has been decoded from human brain activity in controlled clinical settings. The hardware to read it is being implanted, refined, and commercialized right now. The legal scaffolding to protect it is being drafted state by state, country by country. And the gap between the technology and the law is the exact territory where sovereignty either gets built or it gets erased, right? This is not science fiction, fam. This is fiction now. This is not the next decade. This is operational. This is funded. This is in human bodies tonight. And the data from those bodies is already moving across networks owned by entities that have not signed your consent form, right? Because there is no consent form yet. Most consumer neural devices on the market today provide no meaningful limitation on access on the data that's collected. Tonight's framework, the sovereignty doctrine, will hold three loads: the technical reality, the legal reality, and the personal protocol you walk out with, right? Three loads, one foundation. Right? Now, I just spoke about inner speech. I just spoke about inner speech, right? In the technical literature, right? It refers to the silent verbal experience humans generate without producing acoustic output. It's the phenomenology that is familiar to every conscious adult. The neuroscience, and until recently, was opaque, but that has all changed, right? Stanford Medicine, working under BrainGate 2 clinical trials, published findings in the journal Cell in August 2025, demonstrating that inner speech evokes clear and robust patterns of activity in motor cortex regions originally believed to be active only during attempted speech. The patterns appear as a similar but smaller version of the activity evoked when a paralyzed patient or participant attempted to speak out loud. The translation was this: the same neurons fire when you imagine saying a word as when you try to say it. Similar amplitude, same code, right? 4 participants were enrolled: 2 males with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, right? Or sclerosis, right? 1 female with ALS, 1 female stroke survivor with tetraplegia, right? And all 4 had microelectrode arrays surgically implanted in the speech-related motor cortex. Analog signals were captured via the Neuroplex E system from BlackRock Microsystems and processed through decoding algorithms. The decoded accuracy ceiling for instructed inner speech reached up to 74% on commanded vocabulary. These researchers also reported that some aspects of free-form, unprompted inner speech were decodable during sequence recall, and counting tasks through the accuracy was lower and the experimental control was tighter. They noted explicitly that the system requires participant cooperation. If a person actively thinks of something else, the model output degrades into incoherence. That last sentence is the entire sovereignty hinge. But we're going to get back to that, right? We're going to get back to that. So, as you know, I have my layman's block for the doctoral show, right? And here's the layman's block for that block of information. This is in plain English, so pay attention if you didn't understand, right? And this is real talk. When you say a word out loud, a specific zip code of your brain lights up. Scientists already knew that. What's new? When you imagine saying the same word in your head, the exact same zip code lights up, just slightly dimmer. Same address, lower wattage, same code on the front porch, right? So if you build a machine sensitive enough to read the dim version, you don't need somebody to talk anymore, right? You just need them to think. And in 2025, Stanford built that machine. 4 people with paralysis volunteered. Teeny chips smaller than a pea got placed on top of their speech motor cortex. The chips listened, the AI translated, the screen produced words, right? The catch right now is this: you have to cooperate. If your mind drifts, the decoder gets confused. If you imagine a song instead of the word you were prompted to think, the output goes scrambled. So in a strict sense, today, nobody can rip a sentence out of your head against your will, right? Today, right? The sovereignty question is not what's possible today. The sovereignty question is, What's possible the day after the cooperation requirement gets removed by the next algorithmic breakthrough? And history says that the day is not far away, right? We just decoded a phenomenon, right? Nobody could even measure 12 years ago, right? Warriors, hear me clear. Cognitive territory is the next defense perimeter. It's time to build it. Go build it now, right? Go build it. That was the layman's block. So let's continue. The brain computer interface industry, or BCI, right, as of early of 2026, runs on 3 operating models, each with different innovativeness profiles, right, and regulatory postures and cooperate trajectories. Operating model number 1 is this. You need high bandwidth intracortical implants, right? You need a lead operator, which is usually Neuralink, right? And Neuralink Inc. And as of January of 2026, Neuralink reports 21 participants in its global risk, global human trials, right? That expanded from 12 the previous September. The company coincides N1 implant is sealed in the skull with flexible electrode threads inserted into cortical tissue by a robotic surgical system, right? That's designated R1. On October 28, 2025, the University College London announced that Paul, the first United Kingdom patient implanted under Neuralink's protocol, controlled a computer by thought within hours of his procedure. Cumulative implant usage across the trial population now exceeds 15,000 hours. And here's operating model number 2, right? Number 2. Endovascular minimally invasive implants, right? That Synchron Inc. And their stentrode device is delivered through a catheter into the jugular vein and lodged in the superior sagittal sinus area, right? Recording motor cortex signals through the vessel wall without open brain surgery. The Command Every feasibility study reported 12 months of safety with no neurological adverse events across 6 participants. In November 2025, Synchron raised over $200 million in Series D financing to fund a pivotal trial scheduled for 2026 and to develop a next generation high channel wall brain interface, whole brain interface, right? Sorry about that. And then there's operating model number 3, right? Which is a research grade it's a microelectrode array operating under academic clinical trials. The lead operator for that is BrainGate Consortium, right? Across Brown, Stanford, UC Davis, and Massachusetts General, right? Their hardware partner is BlackRock Microsystems. And this is the operating model that produced the 74% inner speech decoding figure and a separate June 2025 UC Davis demonstration of real-time voice synthesis from brain activity at 1/4 of a second latency. Listeners understood approximately 60% of the synthesized words correctly, compared to 4% intelligibility when the participant attempted speech without the BCI. I just mentioned 3 lanes, right? 1 destination with different speeds, right? The 3 companies are here, right? 3 approaches, 1 race, right? Lane 1 is Elon Musk Neuralink, right? Neuralink, they crack the skull, they drop the chip in, threads finer than a hair go directly into the gray matter. Highest data quality is this. It has the highest surgical risk. 12 patients on record right now. this year, right? Up from 12 of last fall. Musk wants this in everybody eventually. Of course he does, right? Healthy people and people who just aren't paralyzed either, right? That's the public play. Lane number 2 is Synchron. Smarter operators in some ways, right? Their device threads into a blood vessel inside your skull. Never cuts open the brain itself. Lower data quality, higher safety profile, right? Faster to scale. They just raised $200 million to run the trial that gets them FDA approved. They might cross the finish line first because their surgery is easier and the FDA is more comfortable, right? And then there's lane number 3. Lane number 3 is the academic crew, right? That's coming from Stanford, Brown, UC, Davis, Mass General. They're not selling a product. They're producing the breakthrough that the product companies eventually license. They proved inner speech decoding. They proved real-time voice synthesis. They proved 60% word intelligibility from imagined speech. Every paper they publish is a building block somebody else is going to commercialize, right? Now hear what nobody is saying loud enough in the room, right? Because if Synchron wins FDA approval first, the threshold for the next 10 companies drops. The first approval is the floodgate. Once one device is legal to sell, the regulatory scaffolding is built and the next 12 companies skate behind it, right? That's how every regulated industry has ever worked. Smarts. I need you to write this down. BCI 2026 is where smartphones were in 2006. The framework gets locked in the next 36 months. Whoever locks it owns it for a generation, right? Now, let's return to Stanford's finding, right? Let's return to Stanford's finding because they have deeper instrumentation because that is the whole inflection point. Okay. The study, right, is this. The lead author by Aaron Kuntz, postdoctoral scholar in neurosurgery at Stanford and published August 14, 2025 in Cell, demonstrated that inner speech could be decoded on command with up to 74% accuracy from a vocabulary of meaningful candidate words. The participants were enrolled in BrainGate 2, an FDA-approved investigational device exemption clinical trial, right? Senior author Frank Willard of Stanford and Howard Hughes Medical Institute framed the results as proof of principle existing systems already restored attempted speech communication for paralyzed users, right? Both, well, I should say, but inner speech is mentally less effortful and would represent the next plateau in restorative communication. 2 technical clarifications matter for the sovereignty frame, right? Here's the first. The 74% figure applies to instructed inner speech. Participants were told to imagine specific target words, and the decoder predicted those words. The decoder still required substantial training data per participant per session, right? Second was this, and more significantly, a parallel body of research at the University of Texas at Austin under Jerry Tang and Alex Huth demonstrated a separate brain decoder that translates ongoing fMRI activity into continuous descriptive text. The 2025 Texas refinement showed that the decoder could be adapted to a new user in approximately 1 hour, right? 1 hour of fMRI exposure to silent video, right? Dramatically below the dozens of hours required by earlier methods. The Texas research also explicitly reported safeguards that the decoder produces incoherent output for non-cooperative participants and produces nonsense when trained on one person and applied to another, right? A third research line published November 5th, 2025 in Science Advances by Toyomoso Horikawa of NTT Inc. of Japan introduced a method called mind captioning. The system generates structured descriptive synthesis of mental visual content, including recalled scenes, by aligning candidate caption features to brain decoded semantic features through iterative word replacement and interpolation, right? The translation is coming. The translation is coming. So, what 74% accuracy actually means, and this is my layman's block, right? This is my layman's block. Imagine this. Imagine I tell you to think the word, let's say dog, right? I'm a cat. No, let's say cat. I'm a cat person. So let's say cat, right? And I'm watching the screen on my decoder. Out of every 100 times I run that test, 74 times my screen says cat, 26 times it says something close or wrong or scrambled. That's where the technology sits today on instructed words. That's not ready for prime time. That's ready for clinical assistive use, right? There's a big difference in that, right? Because if you're trapped in a body that can't move and can't speak, 74% accuracy on a word you've trying to say is a miracle. It's communication where there was silence. That's why this research is sacred work for paralyzed patients, right? Well, hold this with both hands, right? When I say this, 74% today becomes 84% next year and 92% in 5 years, right? That's the consistent trajectory of every machine learning system that gets fed more data, right? The Texas group already showed they can adapt the decoder to a new person in 1 hour. And when the original required dozens of hours, the acceleration curve is real. And the NTT mind captioning study, right? That's the one that should make you sit up and think, right? They didn't just decode words a person was thinking of saying. They decoded what a person was watching, including from memory. And the systems output English sentences describing those scenes. Listen, brain activity into English sentences describing what you're seeing or remembering. Remarkable, right? And to my motivators, this is your stand-up moment, right? Because every century has its sacred line. This century, the line is between your inner life and the network. You either draw the line in the sand or somebody else draws it for you or on top of you, right? You decide which one. Now, let's talk about the NTT study again, right? Because the NTT study deserves dedicated technical treatment because it represents a category shift, not an incremental advance, right? Horikawa's method does not decode language directly from language processing brain regions, but instead it constructs linear decoding models that translate brain activity, recorded via functional magnetic resonance imaging while participants viewed or recalled videos, into semantic features computed by a deep language model, right? Candidate descriptions are then optimized by aligning their semantic features with brain decoded features. The optimization proceeds through iterative word replacement and interpolation until the candidate description matches the neural semantic profile, right? The result is well-structured English descriptions of viewed or recalled mental content. generated without relying on mechanical language network. The system functions in the author's explicit characterization as an interpretive interface between mental representations and text. They flag the implications, right? A potential alternative communication pathway for individuals with aphasia, right? Or other language expression difficulties. And simultaneously, a demonstrated capability to verbalize non-verbal thought. The category shift is this. Prior research decoded with someone and what they were trying to say. This research decoded what someone was thinking about. It gave visual semantics. It gave mental imagery. It gave a recall. The internal cinema. The structured descriptions captured viewed content with measurable accuracy and generalized to recalled content where there was no external stimulus at all. The technical caveat is this. It remains within a research grade fMRI environment, which requires participants to lie still inside of a multi-million-dollar machine. It's not portable. It's not consumer grade, at least not today, right? But the principle has been demonstrated. The bridge from neural pattern to neural language sentence has been built. Once the principle exists, the engineering question is the only question left, right? And here's my language block, right? Here's my language block, right? Why this matters for everyone, not just paralyzed patients, right? Because up until 2025, every brain reading breakthrough was a gift to people who lost the ability to communicate. Honor that, right? The work is righteous. It restores dignity, right? But the same technology in any other context becomes something else. You got to watch the layers, right? And the layers are this. And let's start with layer one. The decoder reads what you're trying to say. Restorative use case for paralyzed patients is purely good, right? But layer two, the decoder reads what you're imagining saying. And even when you have no intention of saying it out loud, that's inner speech, still partly cooperative today, but could be expanded in the next decade. And then there's layer three, right? The decoder reads what you're picturing, memory, or experiencing internally. That's mind capturing, right? NTT just showed the principle works. And then there's layer four. Layer four, the decoder reads layers 2 and 3 from a wearable device, in a workplace, in a courtroom, in a marketing focus group, in a border checkpoint. That's the layer nobody has built yet, right? But every prerequisite component exists, right? So when somebody tells you this is just for medical assistance, they're telling you the truth about it today and lying about the trajectory, right? The global market for neurotechnology was $13.47 billion in 2023 and is projected to surpass $21 billion by 2026, growing at roughly 12% annually, according to the market analysis cited in the Harvard Business Review. That's $4 billion surge in 3 years. That's not medical only growth. That's commercial. That's consumer, right? And right now, today, a 2024 Neural Rights Foundation report found that 29 of 30 consumer neurotechnology companies that it audited provided no meaningful limits on their access to the brain data their devices collect. And almost all of them can share that data with third parties. Final bosses, here's your business intelligence, right? Any organization you build, sell, advise, or invest in will have to take a position on neural data within the next 36 months. There is no neutral, right? That was the language block. Now, let's pivot. Now to the legal scaffolding, right? Let's talk about four jurisdictions inside the United States that have enacted statutory protection specifically addressing neural data, right? And at least 7 more have proposals pending as of mid-2025, right? Jurisdiction 1 is in Colorado, right? The House Bill 24-1058 was signed into law by Governor Jared Polis on April 17, 2024, and took effect April 7, 2024, making Colorado the first state in the United States to enact targeted legislation protecting consumer neural data. The bill amended the Colorado Privacy Act to classify neural data as sensitive personal information requiring opt-in consent, right? And then jurisdiction 2, right, came out of California. Senate Bill 1223, sponsored by State Senator Josh Becker, was signed into law by Governor Gavin Newsom on September 27, 2024, and took effect January 1st, 2025. The bill amended the California Consumer Privacy Act to include neural data within the definition of sensitive personal information. The statutory definition covers data generated by measuring activity of consumers' central or peripheral nervous system, excluding data inferred from non-neural sources, right? And then jurisdiction number 3 came out in Montana, right? Senate Bill 163, signed in 2025, extended the state's existing generic information privacy protections by neurotechnology data and provided enhanced rights to Montana residents, right? And jurisdiction number 4 is coming out of Connecticut, right? Senator Bill 1295 was signed by Governor Ned Lamont on June 24th, 2025, with most provisions effective July 1st, 2026. The bill amends the Connecticut Data Privacy Act to classify neural data, defined as any information generated by measuring central nervous system activity, as sensitive data, right? Globally, Chile became the first country to amend its constitution to protect mental integrity and neural data, with amendments to Article 19 of the Chilean Constitution signed into law in October 2025, right? In August of 2023, the Chilean Supreme Court issued the world's first judicial ruling on neural privacy in a case filed against the consumer neurotechnology company Emotive Inc., right? Currently pending in Connecticut implementation, plus active proposed legislation in Illinois, Massachusetts, Minnesota, and Vermont. Minnesota's Senate filed 1240, right? Would, if passed, prohibit governmental entities from collecting brain transcribed data without informed consent, and prohibit companies from using brain-computer interfaces to bypass conscious decision-making, right? In April 2025, Senators Maria Cantwell, Chuck Schumer, and Ed Markey wrote to the Federal Trade Commission requesting investigation of potential neural data exploitation as BCI technologies advance, right? And here's my language spot. Right? Stay with me. We're almost done. This is doctoral. Take some notes. Make sure you've been taking notes, right? We're almost done. You're right in plain English in 2026, right? If you live in California, Colorado, Montana, or Connecticut, you have specific legal protections that classify your brain data as the most sensitive category of personal information. Companies that collect it have to ask you, get a yes, and limit what they share. That's on the floor, right? If you live in any other of the 46 states, your brain data is protected only by general consumer privacy laws, which were not written with neurotechnology in mind. There is no federal law in the United States today that specifically protects neural data. The Senate has asked the Federal Trade Commission to look into that. That's where the federal protection sits. A request letter in April 2025, right? Internationally, Chile is the only country with a constitutional amendment specifically protecting neural rights. Spain, France, Argentina, and Brazil have studied the issue. UNESCO has issued advisory positions. The United States, the United Nations, is paying attention. None of those produce binding law for you yet, right? Practical sovereignty protocol is for my smarts, motivators, and the warriors, right? 1, read the privacy policy of any wearable that monitors brain, sleep, focus, or emotional state. It does not explicitly limit third-party sharing of neural or biometric data. Treat it as if every signal you produce is being sold or could be, right? And then number 2, if you operate or invest in a company that produces neural data products or services, draft an internal neural data handling protocol now. Do it now, right? Compliance posture for the next 5 years will be defined by what you do in the next 12 months, right? And then number 3, if you live in a state without neural data protection, contact your state legislator. The model bills exist, right? Connecticut, California, Colorado, Minnesota, pick one, send it over, right? And then number 4, practice metacognitive sovereignty. Beware of what you're thinking. Practice turning the inner narration off and on. The cognitive muscle that knows the difference between deliberate thought and ambient mental noise is the same muscle that decoders rely on to keep you engaged, right? And to my warriors, the last one is your warrior practice for the rebirth. And that was my lightning slot, right? Now, I'm going to pull this all together for my doctoral efforts of consciousness sovereignty architecture, right? We're going to talk about 3 layers, right? And those 3 layers compose of human AI integration in the architecture, right? We're going to start with the biological layer, the interface layer, and the network layer, right? Because the merger happens at the interface. The harvest happens at the network. The sovereignty either holds at the biological layer or it does not hold anywhere, right? And what we cover tonight maps directly into each layer. The biological layer, which is your inner speech, is biologically generated. Motor cortex involved, semantically structured. The signal exists whether or not anyone reads it. Sovereignty at this layer means knowing how your own cognitive processes work and choosing what enters which channel, right? Interface layer, the implant, the electrode ray, the endovascular sensor, the wearable EEG, the fMRI machine. This is where the signal becomes data, right? Sovereignty at this layer means owning the decision about whether to allow an interface at all. And if so, on what terms, with what consent, and with what shut off, right? And then there's the network layer, the decoded text, the inferred semantic content, the marketed analytics, right? The legal classification. Sovereignty at this layer means knowing the law, knowing your contract, knowing where your data flows after the decode, knowing what you have agreed to without even realizing it, right? The 3 layers must be defended together. A failure at any one layer collapses the other. You can have the strongest biological self-awareness in the world and still lose your sovereignty if you sign a 5-paragraph terms of service that gives away your neural data forever. You can have the best contract on earth and still lose if the technology can decode your inner speech without consent, and the law has not caught up, right? It's all in the ethics, right? This is the foundation we're pouring tonight. It's not paranoia, people. It's architecture. The sovereign mind in 2026 is built deliberately. It does not happen by accident. The rebirth lens applied. The rebirth requires reclaiming what was already given away in the previous architecture. The first thing to reclaim is the inner room, right? Now, Arc 3 of Season 4 is the foundation. We talked on episode number 217 all the way through episode 240, right? That's when this one ends. We are episode 234. We got 6 episodes left in the arc before we transition to Arc 4, the construction. And at episode 241, the slab is almost cured, right? Every Merger Wednesday from here through the end of the year ladders into the Merge book series. Not Go Time 3, the Merge, the Living White Paper, and Companion Deck will sync after tonight, right? The directive is in, right? The sync is silent. The sync is automatic, right? Tonight's content gets logged into consciousness sovereignty architecture under Arc 3 neural interfaces, episode 20. And to my 4 pillars, right? To my smarts, to the community, to the sovereign. Let's start with the smarts, right? Your homework. Take the layered architecture from segment 13 and apply it to one decision you're sitting on right now. Not theoretical, but one concrete decision. And then deploy the framework, right? To my final bosses, your homework. Identify one part of your business or your portfolio that touches biometric, neural, or attention data. If you cannot name your data handling protocol on demand, it's time to build one, and you need to build one this quarter, right? And to my motivators, your homework is somebody in your life is operating without a sovereign mind. They are letting the network run their inner narrative. Have one conversation this week about reclaiming the inner room. One conversation. That's it, right? And to my warriors, your homework. Practice the metacognitive sovereignty drill. 5 minutes. Turn the inner narration off. Notice what is left. The space is where the sovereign self lives. You need to train it, right? And for those who don't know what I'm talking about, when I'm speaking to the warrior, I'm speaking to my warriors who might have BCIs, right? This is how the foundation gets poured, not in theory, in the calendar, in the conversations, in the contracts, in the consciousness, right? Final boss family, you do not get reborn into a body whose mind has already been licensed. You build the sovereignty the merge would need. That is the governing declaration of this season. Tonight is the proof of why, right? Now, the signal harvest is real. The decoders are real. The implants are real. The legal patchwork is real. The trajectory is exponential. The protections are early. The window to define the architecture is open and it is closing. You do not need to fear this. You need to architect it. That is the difference between a victim and a sovereign. A victim watches a storm. The sovereign builds the house, signs the deeds, and sets the terms, and tells the storm where the boundary is, right? Tonight's declaration, I own the room my thoughts live in. I decide who gets the key. I decide what crosses the door. I decide what I license, what I sell, what I keep. The merger does not own the merger. The sovereign does. I build the sovereignty, the merger we'll need, right? Remember, smarts run the play, final bosses build the protocol, motivators hold the line, warriors defend the room, right? Warriors defend the room. Give me a second. Man, we're almost done. We are almost done, right? Give me a second. We got 5 minutes left, people. Got 5 minutes left and we're done, right? Now, I hope you're enjoying the content, right? I hope you're enjoying the content. And we got 5 minutes left before we close out, right? And as we are ending Arc 3, Arc 4, the construction is opening. I've been super excited about the direction that each one of our shows have been flowing through, right? Flowing through the rebirth, flowing through Arc 3, the foundation, right? And there's a certain rhythm that's been flowing through the entire season with the rebirth, right? And if you find it, drop it in the chat. If you know what it is, drop it in the chat right now. I'm curious to know, right? If you guys are really paying attention, right? To my smarts, my motivators, my warriors, and my final bosses, I really want to know if you guys have been paying attention. Drop it in the chat, right? And you know, there's one more thing before we go. I got a couple 4 more minutes, right? 4 minutes before we go. There's one layer we have not touched yet, right? And this is a quiet one, right? The one that runs underneath every commercial headline, right? And that layer is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, right? DARPA, one of my favorite corporations, right? They have been running a program since March of 2018 called Next Generation Non-Surgical Neurotechnology, or N3 for short. Six contractor teams from Battelle Memorial Institute, Carnegie Mellon University, Johns Hopkins University, Applied Physics Laboratory, and Palo Alto Research Center, Rice University, and Teledyne Scientific, right? 2 of those teams have publicly disclosed grants of $19.4 million and $18 million, with the total program funding higher than that, right? The mandate from DARPA's own program description is direct. Develop high-performance, bidirectional brain-machine interfaces for able-bodied service members with applications in unmanned aerial vehicle control, active cyber defense, and multitasking during complex military missions, right? Bidirectional. That means read from and write to, right? Able-bodied, no surgery, wearable, portable. The end state is a helmet or headset that lets a service member command a drone swarm with a thought, feel a network intrusion as a sensation, and a team with computer systems on timeline too fast for unaided humans to process. The technical approaches under N3 use optics, acoustics, electromagnetics, and in some teams, magnoelectronic nanoparticle delivered intranasally or intravenously to migrate to neural targets and act as wireless transducers. That's not Neuralink. That's not Synchron. That's a parallel research track aimed at military readiness with a deliberate civilian dual use pathway. DARPA invited federal regulators in from program inception, which means the regulatory bridge for civilian transition is already being built in the parallel, right? Now connect this to what we covered in those earlier segments, right? The clinical research proves the principles. The commercial companies build the consumer hardware. The academic partners produce the breakthroughs. The defense agency holds the high performance research line. All four streams feed the same eventual reservoir. The sovereign protocol I am leaving you with tonight is in 5 moves, right? Take notes on this before we close, right? Move number 1, audit every device you wear, charge, or sync. If it touches your head, your wrist, your sleep, your focus, or emotional state, write down what neural or biometric data it captures and where the data flows. If you cannot answer these 2 questions for any device, the device controls you and not the other way around, right? Move number 2, read the privacy policy of one app this week. Just one. Look specifically for biometric, neural, inferred, and third party. Your eyes will start to recognize the pattern and language that hands the keys away, right? And then move number 3, practice the silence drill. 5 minutes daily. Sit, turn the inner narration off. Most people cannot do this for 30 seconds at all, right? The drill is not meditation. The drill is locating the part of you that is not a verbal stream, because that part is the part the decoders cannot reach, right? And then move number 4, pick your jurisdiction. If you live in California, Colorado, Montana, and Connecticut, you have statutory leverage. Use it. If you live anywhere else, draft a 1-paragraph letter to your state representative and send it in. The model bills are public record. The work is done. You just have to send the email, right? And then move number 5, architect the conversation in your circle, your family, your team, your boardroom, your community. Bring in this episode if you have to. Use the 3-layer doctrine, biological interface network. Once the framework is shared, the sovereignty scales beyond the individual into the collective. That is the protocol. 5 moves, 5 free to deploy, no subscription, no middleman, no license, none of it required for your own consciousness, right? And to my final boss family, as we close, this is the last word, right? The signal harvest is the first chapter of the longer book. The clinical work is righteous. The commercial work is inevitable. The military work is operational. The legal work is catching up. The sovereignty work belongs to you, only you, right? Nobody outsources it. Nobody franchises it. Nobody can do it for you. The rebirth is not a slogan. The rebirth is what happens when a person reclaims the room their thoughts live in and decides deliberately what enters and what exits, right? That is the foundation of season 4. That is the architecture of the merge. That is the doctrine in the sovereign, right? I built the sovereignty the merge would need. So can you. Build it tonight, build it tomorrow, build it for the next 36 months. By the time the neural rights conversation reaches your dinner table, you will already have the answer drafted, the protocol installed, and the boundary held up, right? Remember, my smarts, they run the play. Final bosses build the protocol. Motivators hold the line. Warriors defend the room. This has been Merger Wednesdays number 20, the Final Boss podcast number 234. Arc 3, the foundation, season 4, the rebirth. 65 minutes on record. Every claim has been verified. Every reference logged. The slab is poured. The rebar is set. The cure begins now. The sovereign is signing off. That is our show, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. And as always, there's a heavy pain that comes with discipline, but there is an even heavier pain that comes with regret. I am here. We are here. Be balanced. be equal, and be smart. And that's our show for tonight. And if I don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. That is our show. Thank you for joining us. And we shall see you tomorrow for Special Guest Thursdays. Talk to you soon.
It's Merger Wednesday. The countdown continues. 7 years until the convergence of biology and machine. Neural interfaces are no longer theory. They're the scaffolding of a new consciousness. But what does that mean for identity? For free will, for the soul? This is where we build the frameworks for ethical, philosophical, and spiritual growth for the next phase of human evolution. We're not just upgrading hardware. We're rewriting what it means to be human. Each week, we explore the biotech breakthroughs, decode the cognitive shifts, and prepare the mind for the merge. This isn't about fear, it's about readiness. Because the future isn't waiting. It's already wiring in. This is about preparing human consciousness for the most significant leap in our species' history. If you think this is just about chips and brains, you're not ready. But we'll get you there, one Wednesday at a time. So sit back and relax as we take you on a journey on Merger Wednesday.